You asked, Mr. Speaker, what would the nuclear industry ask? Well, I can tell you that they asked this committee in 1992 to combine the construction and operating license. We did that. That was the 1992 Energy Act. In 2005, President Bush, Republican House and Senate, they asked the nuclear industry, what do you need? They said, well, we need to consolidate the licensing proceedings for modular nuclear reactors. That's exactly what was in the 2005 Energy Act. But in addition to that, we have authorized the Price-Anderson Act for them for 25 years to protect them against insurance exposure, because they're the only industry that cannot, in fact, get insurance from the private sector. That we enacted a production tax credit for the nuclear industry. We enacted a tax credit that allows all nuclear power plant owners to deduct the cost of the money they put into their nuclear power plant decommissioning funds from their taxes. We authorized the DOE to assist companies in helping to get their power plant licensing requests through the NRC. We authorized a wide-ranging DOE R&D program in nuclear power plant technologies. And perhaps most importantly, and this is what they say is absolutely the bottom line need that they have, we authorized a $50 billion government-backed loan guarantees for the nuclear industry and other advanced technologies, which means that if the utility defaults, the American taxpayer is on the line for the money, which is the system in France and China. They're socialist and communist countries. We adopted that provision for them. However, there's no question that even with all that said and done, that if there's a cap-and-trade system put in place and a low-carbon economy is created, that would be the best marketplace incentive for the utility industry to move back towards the nuclear industry, because then a premium would be placed upon this. So the marketplace is the best place for them, although they have been dependent upon government support for the last 50 years, and they've only intensified in their requests over the last 3 or 4 years, which has been met by the Congress. So that's just the reality of the nuclear industry. It will do better in a cap-and-trade system. Second, on your point about the 34 times that the Department of Energy missed their deadlines for appliance efficiency, that is accurate. They did. I know that because I requested the GAO report on that issue. I know and have a concern about it because they missed the deadline required in my appliance efficiency law. Now, without question, that led to an additional dozens of power plants that had to be built, fossil fuel plants, in order to generate the electricity for those appliances. However, the reality is, in addition, that when you were Speaker, there was actually a rider that barred adoption of any new or revised appliance efficiency standards, and a second rider actually barred any new standards for fluorescent light bulbs. So to bring this up to the jacuzzi amendment or the hot tub amendment, that provision is inside of the appliance efficiency standards that we are going to require. Now, of all of the things that we would want to have high energy efficiency, it would be, I would think, jacuzzis. I mean, there is a discretionary purchase in the American economy. And all we're saying there is, like light bulbs or refrigerators or stoves, that there should be high standards for energy efficiency in the manufacture of jacuzzis and hot tubs. It's just part of what you were criticizing in the very beginning in terms of the Department of Energy not meeting high energy efficiency standards. And by the way, the standard that we included is the industry consensus standard, and a standard they say they believe all industry participants can meet. And I would just add this one other thing, which is that beginning in 1995, there was a rider attached to every transportation bill which banned the Department of Transportation from improving the fuel economy standards of the vehicles which we drive. So in the same way that not having high standards for appliances led to more fossil fuel electrical generating plants having to be built, sending more CO2 up into the atmosphere, so too did delaying the improvement in the fuel economy standards lead to more imported oil, yes, but ultimately delayed the point in time in which the auto industry would have to meet the innovation test that the rest of the world was applying to our auto industry. So I just point all those things out just to let you know that in the confines of this bill, the nuclear industry is a huge beneficiary. The appliance and other industries will be dealt with in a way that I think matches the kind of prize that they should be receiving for innovation. But it's just creating this work smarter, not harder economy that depends upon innovation rather than the importation or the burning of domestic fossil fuels unnecessarily, although where it's necessary, we obviously need it to continue. So that's the only point I would make to you, Mr. Speaker. These are the things that I have been working on my entire career, and in a lot of ways, this bill that we are now debating makes it possible for us to move to the innovation economy. It makes it possible for us to move forwards to now deal with the reality that we only have 3% of the world's oil reserves while consuming 25% of it, which is an unsustainable long-term profile for our country.
Just two quick comments. You have shown great fortitude today and great patience. Two comments. One, on the question of reserves, I would just cite back what I had said earlier. When you realize the U.S. Geological Survey just increased the Bakken reserve by 2,500% to between 3 and 4 billion barrels from what had been a very small reserve, and you realize that the Brazilians went in the last few years from 10 billion to 100 billion because barrels of reserve because they actually permitted looking for oil. I think, and we literally have gotten 100 years supply of natural gas discovered in the last 3 years. I think that the reserve issue is actually not valid, but is a function of bad government policy. And I just would say, I can't imagine a much better way to close the difference between being liberal and conservative in America than whether or not one could allow consumers to actually evaluate jacuzzis or whether we needed a federal department of jacuzzi regulation. I think it's a perfect contrast in our two approaches, and I have great respect for you and what you're trying to do, but I do think it is a pretty dramatic difference in our view of how America should operate.
Well, I thank you, Mr. Speaker, but again, I'm only referring back to your own criticism of the Department of Energy. And by the way, that was the Bush Department of Energy that missed all 34 deadlines for
Well, I would say
energy
that the mismanagement, for example, of nuclear waste cleanup processes has been an ongoing Department of Energy problem across several administrations. And I have limited faith in the ability of federal bureaucracies to operate with agility and alacrity.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Speaker, but the reality is that the Future Gen project that you talked about and are critical of the Department of Energy decision to walk away from was a decision made by the Bush Department of Energy in 2008.
I agree with you, and I'm happy to be bipartisan in my criticism.
Just so you know, we put $3 billion into the stimulus bill for carbon capture and sequestration. We have already $10 billion built into this bill for carbon capture and sequestration research, development, and demonstration projects. The fundamental flaw, to be honest with you, with the nuclear waste site, because I was here, I was actually chairman of this subcommittee back in that era, was that rather than listening to the National Academy of Sciences, this Congress back then in that time decided that they would pick Yucca Mountain in Nevada, ignoring the National Academy of Sciences. So it was not a science-based decision. It was strictly political. And that's what we're now reaping the harvest of, because whether you put something near a river, near an earthquake fault, you're going to wind up long-term with real problems if you're trying to isolate nuclear materials for 20 or 30,000 years.